Hi everybody, Sarah here from SH Millinery once again with another tutorial, and we're going to be making a flat pattern hat, a cloche hat. Now I've designed the pattern myself, and this will be available free of charge to top tier members in my membership scheme. But for everyone else, it will be available for sale as a PDF pattern in my shop, shmillinery.etsy.com. Now, while I'm doing this video, I'm still adjusting the pattern slightly. So what I'm going to show you in regards to the pattern may have a slightly different look when it's up online. But first of all, I want to talk about fabrics. Now, to be honest, you can use pretty much any fabric for a flat pattern hat, depending on the type of hat you're making. Now, for this cloche, I need something fairly sturdy because I want it to have shape. I don't want it to be flat and floppy and not very nice to wear. So I'm looking at upholstery fabrics. So, for example, this fabric here, it's not too heavyweight, but it would be fine to make this hat with because I could stiffen it if it wasn't stiff enough. And this would be great for making, say, a cap or a pull-on hat or something else. But I'm not going to be using that today. What I'm going to be using are two furnishing fabrics. Now this is the right side of the fabric. But don't ever be put off by using the wrong side of the fabric, because I don't like the right side. I much prefer the wrong side. It's more muted tones and not so busy. And for this hat, so I'm going to use it with this side. I'm also going to be using this, which is not curtaining, it's actually upholstery material, because it is the most gorgeous blue colour and it has a slight pattern on it. Now, it has been rubberized on the back, obviously for use in for upholstering chairs and things like that. But that suits me fine because it's going to make a nice stiffish hat, which I don't have to stiffen anywhere. I won't have to put any stiffening in it anywhere, and it'll be a fabulous colour. So I'm going to fold it with the right sides together. Now, I haven't got a lot of this fabric, but you don't need a lot for this hat pattern. I'm not going to say how much fabric you need because it all depends on the width, it all depends on the length, and it all depends on the fabric. And please bear in mind, the thicker fabric you use, like for example that blue I just showed you, the slightly smaller the hat is going to be in the long run because you're using thick fabric. So bear that in mind, because the pattern will come in a medium, which is about 22.5-inch head, and it'll also come in a large, which is a 23. I suggest you play around, but if you're using a very thick fabric, then you might want to cut it out as the larger size. Right, there are three pattern pieces: the crown and the brim, which comes in two pieces so that it can be downloaded and printed off. What you will have to do with the brim is join these two pieces together, and you see I've done an overlap. So what you do is you line them up. There'll be dots on yours as well. I just never got round to it for this this part of the demo. Join them up and join them together. So there we are. Now we'll be cutting two pieces of fabric with this. We won't be doing a lining because I want the brim to be able to turn up and I want to show the fabric again. Now, if you're not going to be turning the brim up, you could put a different lining fabric. And this is the top part of the hat. And actually, when you get it, it won't have the point on the end. It'll be like that. Because it's a lot easier to sew and you don't end up with a lot of bulk that you have to chop off. Now this, you need 6 in the fabric and 6 in lining fabric. And you've got the straight grain there. So I'm going to place my pattern on here and pin down. And I don't know if I can quite get 3 out. I probably can't of this width because it is just a sample piece of fabric, so it's not that wide. But I'm going to cut across anyway so that I can get the bulk of it out of the way of the video. Oop. There we are. I mean, what you can do is print it off lots of times if you don't want to keep moving the pattern pieces about, because once you've got it as a PDF, you can do what you like with it. Print it off lots, and it's yours to keep forever. All I ask is that you don't sell the pattern. You can sell hats you make from the pattern, but just do not sell the pattern. Because it takes me 4 days to make a pattern and get it right on the computer. So there we've got 2 pieces cut out, and now we need to cut that again. So I'm going to get on with that and I'll be back. Right, once you've cut out your 6 crown pieces, like that, we've now got to cut out the brim. And you'll notice it says on the fold here. Now, whether you turn it upside down and fit it on a fold like that, which I can probably just about do, is up to you. You don't have to particularly have it a certain way round. You know, it doesn't really matter. Although I'm saying that and it probably won't quite fit. So I'll do it this way instead. So here we are. And remember, we've got to cut this out twice. So I'm going to get on with that and come back to you shortly. Right, so I've cut out both my brims and all of my crown pieces. Now, just to say, if you are using upholstery fabric, you are going to have to use probably a sewing machine needle that's either a 16 or a 90, something like that. But do check you've got a heavy-duty sewing machine needle in, and also obviously that your sewing machine can cope with heavy fabrics, because there is going to be a lot of fabric to sew. So this is the way round I want my hat to be the other piece. So I want these in a moment. First of all, we're going to sort the crown out. Now what we're going to do is have a look at the pattern. Now it may be that you want to move the pattern pieces about, that you don't like the way it's cut out. It doesn't help with a big pattern like this. It's easier when you've got something that's small. But obviously if you're using a check or anything like that, you won't be able to match up the checks very easily. You can't match the pattern up unless you've got a lot of fabric and a lot of patience and a lot of time. So I'm going to put that one in the middle, a bit more bump, and that one in the middle like that. Right, now what we need to do is we need to sew 2 together. So we turn that over, we turn that over so that we've got right sides, bits of thread everywhere, right sides together. And we're going to pin and stitch all the way down this side, starting from the middle at the top, so here. Okay. So we pin it together. This fabric's nasty to pin, I have to say. Let's see if I can find a better, sharper pin. That's better. And as I say, I've given a 1 centimetre seam allowance, but again, you may need to. Flat pattern hat making is not an exact science because it depends on the fabric you make, it depends on what size you want it, it depends on your sewing skills, etc. But we're going to sew along there. Now we want to trim that seam a little bit, and then we're going to press it open and top stitch. So as you can see, I've pressed it open, and now I'm going to top stitch on the other side with a narrow top stitch. So we've got 2 pieces joined, and now we've got to join a third. So again, we're going to join this one onto the other side and do exactly the same thing. When you're pressing open on a curve like this, if you haven't got a presser block, the best thing to do is press open from one side into about there where the curve starts, then turn it around and press into the other side. You get a neater edge. Now, when you've sewn both of your 3 sections together, you've got half a hat each, we're going to sew these together to each other. Now, the reason I've top stitched is yes, to stop the fabric fraying, also it makes a stronger hat, and it also makes it look nicer. So what I'm going to do now is join up the centres. The centres are the bit that count. So join up the centres. If you're not too sure, sew from the centre down and then the centre down the other side. Okay, so we're going to do that now, and we're going to do exactly the same thing. Sew them together, trim them, and then top stitch them. So once you've sewn all your pieces together, you'll have the top of the hat made. And then what I do is put it onto a block or a bowl and just press it and steam it all the way around, so it's looking neat and tidy. I didn't quite match up the centres at the top, but I will on the next one. Right, on to the next bit. Now we've got to do the brim. And as you'll remember, we've got 2 pieces of the brim. Now what I like to do is lay the top of my hat out flat, just to double check that my brim's going to fit and that I've got enough leeway to sew a seam, which I have. So what I'm going to do is right sides together, sew a seam and join this brim. Now I've sewn my 2 brim pieces together and they've been top stitched, and what I want to do is put right side to right side. And I meant to say that obviously the curviest edge is the bottom of the brim. So like so, we're going to put these 2 together like this. And we're going to pin round all the way around the bottom edge. We're going to sew the bottom edge first, okay? So let's get some pins. Try and match everything up. Oh, I'm gonna have to get some new pins in here. These are all a bit knackered. So my brim's pinned together on the bottom edge, and I'm going to sew my seam here. Now, if you've got a walking foot on your machine, I advise using it, because obviously we're sewing a curve which has a tendency to move one on top of the other. So if you've got a walking foot, which I have, put it on. But if you haven't, doesn't matter. Just take care and put more pins in. Right, once you've sewn the bottom seam, trim and then turn the right way around and press this edge really well. Once you've pressed that edge really well, we're now going to top stitch all the way around. Okay, so we're off to do that now. So once you've top stitched all the way around your brim, press it really well, steam press it, and now pin the top edge of your brim together all the way round. Now what we need to do here is we need to put what's called a stay stitch to keep it in place while we fix it to the hat, and also to stop it fraying, because this material is really fraying a lot. So I don't want it all fraying away and ending up with that. And I wanted a narrow brim, but you know, not that narrow. So we're going to stay stitch that. Now when you stay stitch, you stitch on the biggest stitch on your machine, so 5 or 6. And when you top stitch, a good tip is to again set the stitch length to quite big, to say 4, because it's easier to sew when you're sewing through very thick layers of fabric like you are here. And I've already bent one needle today, so I didn't want to bend anymore. So I'm going to stay stitch that now. Okay. Right, so I've stay stitched round. You can see how badly this is fraying. I'm losing a lot of fabric. Anyway, we won't worry about that just now. So decide what is going to be the front of your hat, what's going to be the back. You might have a particular view that you think looks nicer. I don't know, should that be my front or should that be my front? I haven't decided. Well, I'm going to go with this one. Anyway, decide what's your front and decide what's your back. Now, the easiest way to match things up is to use the seam lines that are already there. You can either have your hat so that that's the middle panel and the middle back panel, or you can do it so you've got the seam. And I'm actually going to do it with the seam for now, just to help you guys out. Now what you've got to do is pin it to your hat all the way around so that we can stitch it on. Now that before anyone yells at me, there are various ways of attaching a brim to a hat, and what I thought I would do is do one of the simplest for you today. I didn't want to make this really complicated for those of you perhaps are new to flat pattern hat sewing. So I should have trimmed this seam, by the way, and I've forgotten, so I might have to take it off. Anyway, we're going to stitch it all the way round, okay, so that the brim will then be attached to the hat. Just a quickie, while you're sewing the inside brim to the hat or anything like that, you're best off, if you've got a free arm, to have it as a free arm sewing machine so that you can work your hat, ouch, just stabbed myself with a pin, underneath like that. And you can work round without getting into a pickle. Brim to the hat, as you can see, and you can see this fabric has just frayed and frayed and frayed and frayed. So I'm going to have a lot of odd threads to cut off at the end of this sewing exercise, but I won't worry too much till the end of it. So what I'm going to do is fold up that edge and now top stitch all around here, sewing as close as I can to the seam. Keep your finger underneath so that all the folds are folded in the right direction. And be careful over the bulky points. Go very slowly so that you don't break your needle or bend it. Right, my last thing to do at the moment is to do the lining. Now what I've done is I've cut out 6 of the crowning lining. I'm just using a lightweight polyester fabric for this. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly the same as we did for the top of the hat. We're going to join 3, join the other 3, but this time no top stitching. So I've sewn my lining all together. Hopefully you can see that. And that is going to go into the hat like that. So wrong side to wrong side. And then, oh, bit of a, and pin it to your inside seam. Now, what I suggest doing is to check that it's going to fit, match up your quarters first, so you can sort of get them in the rough place, and then pin with your seam turned over. But I'm going to carry on with that and show you in a minute. Right, once you've pinned your lining all the way round, double check that it reaches the bottom of the hat, that it actually fits nicely. You want to make sure your lining is not too short or it's too big and bulky. So check that it's all going to fit smoothly. Pin it all the way round. And what we're going to do, and the best thing when you're pinning, hold it like that so that you can fit it nicely to the brim. Now we're going to slip stitch all the way round. Now, as I said before, there are various ways of adding a lining to a hat, but I'm doing the easiest one for you. And also, we're only slip stitching this by hand because we've still got to do more machine sewing because we've got to put a sweatband in. So I'm going to slip stitch this all the way around. Back to you in a mo. So the last thing we've got to do now is put the Petersham sweatband in. The lining has been slip stitched in, and you'll know from previous videos that I've done that you swirl the Petersham with an iron. So I've done that, and we are now going to put it into the hat. Now we want the widest piece, the curviest piece, towards the brim. So I'm going to find the back of the hat, and we're going to work round and pin in place. So like this. Okay. And if you've swirled it enough, it should fit nicely all the way round. Right, once it's been sewn in, now normally I would have done grey on the top thread and then the ivory for the bottom, but I've kept it at ivory just so you can see it better. So it's stitched very close to the edge. Now give this a whole shot of steam from your steam iron, and then either ram it onto a dolly head or a mannequin or your own head at a push, and that will stretch and flatten the Petersham. And then it's just up to you to trim the hat. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you've had fun, and do let me know if you make one.